This is Valley Public Radio. I'm David Alves, and welcome to Young Artist Spotlight. Support for Young Artist Spotlight comes from the Bonner Family Foundation and from the California Arts Council's Arts and Public Media Grant. Our guest performer in this episode is a violinist from Bakersfield who is no stranger to Young Artist Spotlight. He's been in our studios before for live on-air performance, and we're glad to get to hear the development of his artistry and get to know him a little better. Brian Shih. Brian Shih, welcome to Young Artist Spotlight.
Hello, Mr. Oz.
Great to have you with us. Now, you've been on Young Artist Spotlight a few times before. I was trying to look and see. Do you remember how old you were when you made your first appearance on Young Artist Spotlight?
See, I want to say maybe like 16.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So we've had you in our studio for a couple of times. So we're just doing it a different way this season. And and you've very graciously shared with us some video performances of yours, a couple solo, and then a really exciting one with the Bakersfield Symphony Orchestra, which we'll talk more about. But let's go back to the beginning. How did you get started in music? What prompted you to start playing an instrument?
You know, it's been a long time. As far as I remember, I think it was just like my parents getting me into music. But why I continue is there was a performance that I watched with the Bakersfield Symphony Orchestra of a blind pianist. I think his name is Nobuyuki Tsuji. That his performance really inspired me to continue playing.
How so? I'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah, listening to his story about his blindness and how he was able to learn all these very powerful pieces. You know, Rachmaninoff. He played the Rachmaninoff piano concerto for the performance that I watched, and you know, it's just very impressive to see him play the piano. You know, because he plays
Excellent.
in a very unique way.
Excellent. Now, how old were you when you started piano lessons? I'm sorry, violin. Yeah. Sorry.
Violin lessons. I want to say I was either like 4 or 5 years old.
Okay, and you've been with that instructor the whole time. Who's your instructor?
Yes, so my private instructor is Elvira Arambula.
All right, a proud member of the Bakersfield Symphony Orchestra. Well, you two have done quite a lot of work together. You really have, and congratulations to you on passing a major milestone in your life. You just graduated from Stockdale High School. Congratulations, brand new alum.
Thank you very much.
Let's get into some music, and we'll start with the shortest piece that you shared in the earliest piece from Bach. This Partita number 2 in D minor, the gig. What can you tell us about this piece?
It's a pretty hard piece. It was one that took a bit to really learn. You know, I started off learning it thinking that it was like going to be a slow piece, and then I ended up playing in a somewhat fast pace. So some big changes happened along the way.
What's the most challenging part of it, would you say, in putting together? What'd you work on the most in putting it together?
At least for me, it was really just learning how to master the string crossing and maybe even the fingering too. There's a lot of awkward fingering in there. But the majority of my practice went into smoothing out the string crossing.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and listen to this piece from Johann Sebastian Bach, Partita number 2 in D minor. That was music of Johann Sebastian Bach, Partita number 2 in D minor, performed by Brian Shih, the violinist, our guest on Young Artist Spotlight. That was fantastic, Brian. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Thank you very much.
Bach, always interesting and engaging and oftentimes challenging, and really fun to hear how you overcame the challenges to smooth that out. That was terrific. Let's hear another piece from you from Spanish composer Pablo Sarasate. Music from the late 1800s from his suite of 8 Spanish dances. The piece you have shared with us is Romanza Andaluza. Tell me about this piece.
Yes, so I actually first learned this piece back in elementary. I think I was 5th grade. In 5th grade when I learned the piece. And I think it was like my first major milestone in violin. And yeah, it presented a great challenge to me back then. And I decided to revisit it for my senior year. And it was still a pretty big challenge.
Still challenging?
Yeah, because, now I look back at my elementary school recording and I'm like, I think I could improve this, So
yeah.
A lot of work went into that piece, and I think it's my best attempt yet.
What do you like best about this piece?
Ooh, yeah, it's very passionate. I feel like I have a lot of freedom with my bow arm. I could pretty much make do with it however I please and just show some raw emotion into it,
Excellent. Yeah. Well, Sarasate, influential member in the Romantic period, and that's when the expression starts coming into full bloom. And so we're supposed to bring that kind of passion and fire to things. So that's great. Yeah. Looking back on kind of like, you look back to playing this in 5th grade and now 7 years later, and a lot more about music, and a lot more about life too. So you have a better, and I think one of the arcs we go through as performers is, getting past just kind of making the notes and making sure we played them with the right rhythms, but really telling a story with music. So did you feel like you were able to do that this go around with this Sarasate piece?
Yeah, definitely. It's just looking at back in my past self and then comparing it to my present self. It's very eye-opening to see how much I've actually changed over the years.
Well, let's listen to this from the Spanish composer Pablo Sarasate, Romanza Andaluza, performed by violinist Brian Shih on Young Artist Spotlight. That was violinist Brian Shih, our guest today on Young Artist Spotlight, performing music of the Spanish composer Pablo Sarasate. Sarasate, not just a great composer, he was also a virtuoso violinist of his day. So we heard the work of somebody who knows how to write for the instrument. That was fantastic, Brian. Really happy to be able to share that with our audience. Really, really good. Thank you. So we've heard a couple of solo features for you now, but that's only part of what you do as a violin player. Tell me about some of the symphonic groups that you perform in.
I performed with the Bakersfield Youth Symphony Orchestra. Just recently, I performed with the Bakersfield Symphony Orchestra. I played with the Stockdale High Symphony Orchestra. Did All-State. I participated in both All-State String Orchestra and All-State Symphony Orchestra. Both of them were very unique experiences. And then the current high on orchestra.
And obviously this year, very, very different. Lots more time performing solo and a lot less time performing together in live rooms with other musicians. What do you kind of miss most about that, not having so much of that orchestral experience this past year?
It's just like a lot of the interaction with your stand partner, for example, or like, asking for suggestions on fingerings, or just like all the interaction that comes with the orchestra, listening to the other parts while you're playing, and while the conductor, the most important man in the orchestra. It's just a very, very amazing experience that I really missed.
Yeah.
From the pandemic.
You've been in Bakersfield Youth Symphony Orchestra. How many years now have you been performing with that group?
I have been performing for about 6 years.
Oh, excellent. Very, very good. And then in November of last year, you were able to perform under very special circumstances with the Bakersfield Symphony Orchestra. How did that come about? Tell me about that.
I was invited by the Bakersfield Symphony Orchestra to perform a solo last summer. But the thing was, I wasn't able to perform the solo that I was preparing for the youth symphony because of COVID restrictions. So I had to learn a new piece, the Mozart, and it was a challenge it was a pretty big challenge for me, but I was able to pull through, and I really like the outcome of it.
Well, I'm looking forward to sharing the outcome with our audience. So how long did you work on this Mozart violin concerto in A major? How long did you work to get it into shape for performance?
If I remember correctly, it was about 2 months, 3 months.
Well, Mozart wrote 5 violin concertos during his lifetime, all of them in the year 1775 when he was still in his teens. Just amazing. He may well have performed some of these concerti on his own, but it's considered that this one was actually written for another violinist, the Italian Antonio Brunetti, who was a fellow violinist in the orchestra of the Archbishop of Salzburg. What do you like best about this movement that we hear?
It's a very delicate movement. It was very challenging, of course, to learn all the notes, but it was also, I have to keep in mind about every single note that I play, because all the focus is on the soloist, or the majority of it, and
right.
There's no orchestra to hide all your wrong notes.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're right down front and center, all eyes on you and all ears on you. Yeah, and you're thoroughly exposed. Exactly right. Yeah. So you learned, this isn't a piece you had played with another symphony before then. This one you learned expressly to perform with Bakersfield Symphony Orchestra?
Yes.
Wow. Well, and we should note that Bakersfield Symphony Orchestra doing amazing things this past year and continuing working through constraints of pandemic. And, one of the things that happened with pandemic is guest artists from afar weren't able to travel and come and play and wouldn't. So Bakersfield Symphony Orchestra found some really wonderful and creative ways to reach out to local musicians of exceptional talent like Brian Shih and have them perform. So this was recorded in November of 2020, correct? And recorded for actually broadcast on local television then. And so we thank Bakersfield Symphony Orchestra for sharing this recording with us. This is Brian Shih, violinist, our guest on Young Artist Spotlight today. performing with the Bakersfield Symphony Orchestra music of Mozart Violin Concerto Number 5 in A major, Kerschel 219. That was the Bakersfield Symphony Orchestra with featured violin soloist Brian Shih, who's our guest today on Young Artist Spotlight, performing the first movement of Mozart's Violin Concerto Number 5 in A major, Kurschel 219, music from 1775, written when Mozart was still in his teens. Brian, that was fabulous. Really, really great to hear that.
Thank you.
Must have been exhilarating to perform with that orchestra.
Yes, it was. You know, it was my first time performing with like an adult orchestra. A surreal experience.
Yeah, and then even a little bit more surreal, you know, doing socially distanced and everybody in masks and all that, but working through constraints to provide beautiful music, and that's just really, really inspiring. So you've just graduated high school. You've let me know that your inspiration to play music. So what's next for you? Where are you headed? And what are your musical goals now?
I'm headed to CSU Long Beach as a music performance major. And my goal is to eventually become an orchestra musician.
Very, very good. What do you like best about playing?
There's a lot of things to like about playing. The one thing that I really like about playing is that I have my own mental space, I guess. It's very relaxing to play, especially when you have a lot of things going on. Playing can be a sort of relief for me.
Yeah, that's very, very good. That's very, very good. Well, Brian, it's been great visiting with you, getting to know you a little bit better, and wonderful to be able to share your artistry with our audience. Thanks so much for being on Young Artist Spotlight.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, that concludes another episode of Young Artist Spotlight. Thanks to our guest artist, violinist, and brand new alumnus of Bakersfield Stockdale High School, Brian Shih. We'd like to expend special thanks to the Bakersfield Symphony Orchestra. Bakersfield Symphony has worked hard during the pandemic to spotlight local musical talent such as Brian Shih and bring the community together through digital concerts and educational programming. If you'd like to learn more about the virtual and in-person programs the Bakersfield Symphony has to offer for the upcoming season, I invite you to visit their website at www.bsonow.org. Special thanks also to CMAC for video production. Support for Young Artist Spotlight comes from the Bonner Family Foundation and from the California Arts Council's Arts and Public Media Grant. For Valley Public Radio, I'm David Alves.